A lot can be said about project management life cycles. I already tried to demystify the concept project life cycle in a previous video. I'll leave a link to that video below. In that video, I promised you to explain how you can get advantages with putting some attention to correctly name the phases of the project management life cycle. Stick around, as that will be the purpose of today's video. Hello, project managers and project management professionals. My name is Steven and I'm a certified project management professional. For more than 20 years now, I have been managing small and large projects. Today, we will have a chat on the concept of project life cycles and more specifically, the naming of the phases. Stay until the end as I also will provide some useful tips to conclude this video. As a reminder, the PMBOK Guide 6th edition confronts us in chapter 1 on page 19 with the project lifecycle concept. Literally, a project lifecycle according to PMI is the series of phases that a project passes through from its start to its completion. On page 20, the Project Management Institute continues to define the project phase as a collection of logically related project activities that culminates in the completion of one or more deliverables. They also claim that these phases are generally given names that indicate the type of work to be done in that phase. As examples, the Institute refers to concept, development, design, test, transition, commissioning, and so on. If you want to know why you would use a project lifecycle, I have to refer you again to my other video. So coming back to today's topic, why is the naming of phases so important? Well, it is all about communication in the end. And we all know how important communication is in project management. As the project management lifecycle, but also the project delivery lifecycle, is your main decomposition structure of your timeline, you can imagine that it will be used a lot as to structure your communication. Especially to senior management, for example. Think about presenting the timeline of your project in a simple way of 5 steps or phases. Or think about explaining about what your project is currently doing without having to write up books and long texts to explain. But it comes with a consequence. If you want to use the project lifecycle to structure that kind of communication, you have to make sure that, well, the number of phases at the first level are limited. Typically 5 phases will be enough to express the main project activities, such as starting up your project, designing it, realizing, transferring and closing the project. Secondly, you need to keep the project management lifecycle as simple as possible, so that also non-project professionals can easily understand the purpose of that lifecycle, as well as the structuration of the project duration into these simple steps. You also have to introduce and to explain the project lifecycle and its phases as from the beginning for all the project stakeholders, not only the project team members. Everybody that will relate with the project needs to understand the phases of the project. Therefore, the names become very important to keep it simple and clear. Third one, last but not least, the names of the phases should be telling. As mentioned before, the names should immediately reveal what the work planned in that particular phase will be about. Question now is how you can make the project phase names telling. Well, according to the Institute, a project phase is the collection of logically related project activities that culminates in the completion of one or more deliverables. If we take that definition, it becomes clear that the phase names should be activity-driven or oriented. Nevertheless, you still might want to consider as well the fact that you could relate to the deliverables that are created rather than to the activities that are performed. Especially in an agile approach, naming the phases or the sprints with the name of the created minimum viable product is worthwhile to consider. Anyways, when considering the names of the project phases, you should take the following considerations into account. 1. What kind of activities are performed in the phase? 2. What is the terminology that is typically used in the client's environment or the environment where the project is performed in? Doing a project on an airport will use different terminology than performing projects in an ICT startup. And 3. What is the subject of the project? A construction project is not the same as a process re-engineering project. Therefore, it will use different language. 4, last but not least, and above all, the names of the phases should be easy to understand by all stakeholders, not just the project manager and his team members, as mentioned before. Let me provide you with the first set of tips and tricks when defining the project phase names. Well, the first do is actually a don't. Please, at all times, avoid making the mistake to use the process groups like they are defined in the PMBOK. I see that both the process groups and project lifecycle concepts are often mingled together, and they shouldn't. To avoid that confusion, I recommend you not to use the names of the process groups. It can be very tempting though. A first typical phase, for example, is to organize all those activities related to starting up the project. It might sound logic then to call that phase the initiation phase. But I believe it is better to call that phase something else, like starting up phase, pre-project phase, approving the project phase, or whatever name suits you best to use in your communications to the stakeholders, and that expresses which kind of activities will be performed. But don't use initiating. A second tip to name your phases is to use a verb in its name. From the definition of PMI, we know now that phases are a collection of related activities. And we know as well that activities are best expressed as a verb. Therefore, using verbs makes the phases sounding action-driven. And in fact, they should be. A project phase is after all a collection of tasks to be performed. A good naming for the generic project management lifecycle would then become something like, for example, starting up the project, conceptualize the project, realize the project, handing over the project result, and close the project. A third do, as you want to use the project lifecycle in a lot of your communications and visual representations, it is good to keep the name of the phase as short as possible. You can do that by using verb-related wording like, for example, starting up, conceptualizing, realizing, handing over, and closing. So that lifecycle is already shorter in its naming than the one I used before. A fourth do might sound a little bit conflicting with my previous recommendations. When further decomposing the project management lifecycle into the project delivery lifecycle, you might want to switch to using nouns as to indicate the major deliverables that will be created as an outcome of those phases. In the end, a project delivery lifecycle will be more specific, deliverable driven and unique to the project at hand. Well, I will make another video on how you can easily create a project delivery lifecycle starting from the project management lifecycle. To conclude today's video, I have some more tips and tricks. The first one, introduce and explain the project lifecycle and its phases during the kickoff meeting. I like to make it a reveal moment as to give it some weight and to draw attention to it, especially when using the short version of the names and explanation is needed at the kickoff event. A second tip is to include the project management lifecycle as part of your reporting bases in your recurrent status meetings. For example, by using the end of phase milestones in your milestone chart. Or use a visual representation of the project lifecycle to indicate the now point. The repetition will make that stakeholders will get used to the project phases and their meaning. Tip 3, in an agile approach, don't use the activities to define the name of a phase or a sprint, but refer to the deliverable, being the name of the minimum viable product. And as always, our disclaimer. Do not use this information to prepare for the exam. Do not worry, the information is correct and in line with PMI's PMBOK. But as the information is practical oriented, the terminology and nuances that I use might be confusing when preparing for the PMP exam. PMI and PMBOK are registered trademarks and copyrighted. You can find more information on their website www.pmi.org. I hope you enjoyed these practical tips and tricks on the concept of project life cycles and that naming the phases has just become a little bit more easy. If you like what we do or want to see more or have a chat, well, you can always take some actions. You can like the video, comment on it, and above all, you can share it with those that can take some advantage from this information. If you want to be informed on new content, you can always subscribe to the About Project Management channel. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you back in one of my other videos. Till then,